All right, so today the discussion and focus is on multi-asset funds where we've seen the AUMs crossing important benchmarks. The entire AUM story of multi-asset allocation fund itself proves the investor interest that's growing in this category. To discuss more on this, I have Ihab Dalwai, Senior Fund Manager, ICICI Pru AMC. Hi Ihab, good evening and welcome to the show. So we'll be talking not only about ICICI Pru's multi-asset allocation fund, which also has crossed, I think, somewhere around 20 to 25 years that the fund has completed. And although the category was categorized in 2018, but the fund was in existence much before that. But just a quick question to you on the entire journey of this category that you have seen till 2018 and post 2018 till now, Ihab. So what has been the important turns and twists in this entire journey of the fund creation, the fund structure, and also investor interest that we've seen growing?
Yeah. Hi, good evening. See, broadly, my association with this fund also started somewhere close to the categorization change around 2017 and 18. So, post the categorization change is something which have been associated with this fund for over the last 6 years now. So, pre that, it was predominantly two asset classes, equity and some debt exposure. But post the categorization change, there has been one more asset class which has been added, which is commodities. And on a minimum basis, we tend to have minimum of 10% commodities, and on a maximum, it can go higher as well. Around 25% is something which it can go towards. So I think the third asset class addition was a significant change pre and post the categorization. But for this particular strategy, pre-categorization change also, it had some component of debt in this particular fund as well. But having said that, from a taxation perspective, it has always been maintained as an equity taxation fund because at a gross level, the equity allocation has always been above 65% for this fund.
Yeah, so if we talk about the latest trend, that we've seen coming in multi-asset allocation fund, the inflows have gone up over two folds from 40 lakh crores to 1 lakh crore is from 40,000 crore to 1 lakh crore journey that we are talking about this category. What according to you could be a primary reason or the main reason in focus over here? Because we know across asset class markets and the investment instruments have been doing good. Investor interest is also towards categories, which are new, which are innovative, thematic also. What, according to you, can be the reason behind this growing interest?
Yeah, see, it's important to note that each of these asset classes in which we can invest in, they perform differently in different phases of the market, be it equities, debt, or commodities. So, if one ends up giving an allocation to a professional management firm like us, and allows them to dynamically manage these asset allocations across these three asset classes, I think that is something which is an advantage today because by dynamically managing the asset allocation, one can also generate returns and alpha over a long period of time, which this category has also demonstrated. So I think the biggest advantage is dynamically managing the asset allocation. Whereas historically, what we have seen is that people tend to have a very static allocation, be it a 60-40 allocation between equity and debt, and not taking advantage of the volatility which each of these asset classes will exhibit. So I think what we bring on the table is trying to dynamically manage the allocation and try to generate some return or some alpha through the volatility which each of the asset classes go through. So I think that is an advantage. And for an individual also, I think it's a one of the most efficient way of doing asset allocation through the mutual fund platform because of the lower costs associated.
Do you also think that because we have exposure in gold and silver, which have been really doing well since almost 1 year now, or more than that slightly,
Mm.
that's also been one of the reasons why investors have gone towards this category fund?
Yes, see, gold and silver has also contributed to the overall performance of the fund. And secondly, it has also been volatile. It's not been that it has been over the last 3 to 4 years, if you look at gold, though it has been on a uptrend, but it has its own volatility. So, like I mentioned earlier as well, if one tries to do it through a fund which can take advantage of the volatility of which each asset class goes through, so it's better to come in and have an exposure to that commodity to a platform like a multi-asset fund rather than having a direct exposure to gold and silver. But rightly said, like if the commodity segment of the fund is also doing well, it will attract investor interest into this particular category.
Uh, Also, Ihab, talking about ICICI Pru's multi-asset allocation fund, what's the structure of the fund typically, and is it more equity dominated? I think that's where the tax benefit also lies. What's the current structure of the fund? If you could just explain to us in terms of exposure towards asset class.
Yeah, sure. So what the mandate requires us to do is that need to have at least minimum 10% in each of the asset classes, be it equities, debt, and commodities. So for while we've chosen it as an equity taxation fund, so at a gross level we need to maintain at least 65% of equity allocation. But on a net basis, we can go lower than that because that's where we can bring an advantage of managing the net equity level based on the valuation of equity market or the earnings cycle which we believe the equity markets would be in. So on a net basis, it can go low. If you look at the historical track record, it has gone slightly below 50% as well. And on the upper side, it has gone as high as 77, 78%. It can't cross 80 because we need to maintain minimum 10% in the other two asset classes. When you look at the commodity exposure, it is ranged between 10 to I would say 18 to 20% as a range for the commodity, and the balance is generally debt or debt-like instruments. We would also have some exposure to REIT and InvIT as well, because those are also good yielding assets. But it would be a small exposure in the overall scheme of things.
Yeah, we are talking about in last 12 months, almost 9.7 million new investors coming in. Investors are moving from bank deposits and coming into equity. A lot of them are new time investors. In terms of opting for low volatility products, why do you think multi-asset allocation category really fits the bill?
See, generally, if you have asset classes which behave, like I mentioned, differently in different phases of the market, then if you try to combine them, generally the correlation between them is low. And that's a way of reducing the risk in the portfolio. And secondly, talking specifically about our ICICI Prudential multi-asset fund, the thought process which we've adopted is a counter-cyclical thought process of investing. So I think the style of investing also to a great extent reduces the risk associated with investing in equities. Combined with the asset allocation which I mentioned of diversifying and reducing the risk. The other point which I would want to make is that we talk about in a pure equity scheme also, if one diversifies across sectors, it can reduce risk. I think the fund goes a level above by diversifying across asset classes and reducing the risk. So if you look at the historical returns also, and if you try to adjust it on the risk, or like a risk adjusted return parameter, if you compare this fund, I think it would fare well on a risk adjusted basis because of the diversification across asset classes, across sectors, and within commodities as well. So when I talk about commodities, it's not that we just have an exposure to gold. We've tried to diversify the commodity exposure as well. So I think the diversification across asset classes and sectors and stocks is something which reduces risk. And on top of that, particularly about ICICI Prudential Fund, the investing style also to a great extent reduces risk.
Yeah, could you also explain the kind of tax benefits that one might get by investing in this category?
See, like I mentioned, we maintain the equity taxation. So I think under the new tax post the budget, short term would be taxed at 20%, long term would be at 12.5. But the advantage is that when we try to move across asset classes, like if we try to sell equities, buy debt, or sell debt and buy equities, those transactions, there's no tax incidence for the end investor. It is only when the investor tries to redeem from the mutual fund, he would be taxed based on the short term or the long term basis. So his holding period in the mutual fund is what matters. Whereas when we try to move across asset classes, it won't be taxed for the individual. So I think that is an advantage for the investor, apart from the equity taxation which the fund offers.
All right, Ihab, thank you so much for being on the show today and answering all the questions on multi-asset allocation category. So definitely for investors who are looking for something very well diversified, have a tax benefit and also low volatility and inflation beating returns, not to forget that, multi-asset allocation category could be the one for them. Thank you so much, Ihab, for being on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
On that note, let's take a quick break, and post that, let's get connected with our financial planner today, who will be answering your queries live. Just in case you are someone who wants a financial planning strategy or a portfolio strategy from us or our experts, you can send across your questions on our WhatsApp number and email ID. See you after this break.